Hey all, Mike Patty here with Cinesamples and Hollywood Scoring, and this is the next video in our series of interviews with our friends in the music scoring community of Los Angeles. And today we're going to have a discussion about the trumpet with our friend Rob Schaer. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you, Mike.
All right, why don't we just get started on the most common instrument, which is the B flat, right?
Yep.
Is that the, when you just write generic trumpet, this is what you pick up?
Pretty much, yep. Almost all the time.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some basic questions.
Sure.
What is the range of the instrument?
Well, you're looking at a concert low F, and then the upper register varies, as with most brass instruments. But trumpet is very specialized. The upper range, depending on whether you're playing jazz, classical. As far as like classical film score, nothing higher than a C or a D.
Okay.
Concert, high C or D. But obviously, I mean, if you're playing jazz and big band and stuff like that, you can go an octave higher that.
Yeah.
Above that, octave above that. Just depends on the player.
C above that, or
yeah.
D above that. Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are guys in town who can do that.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Can you do that when you're warmed up?
Not all the time.
So, all right, so then the lowest note is?
It's a low F, actually a low E.
Low E,
but
right.
it speaks a little funny for us, and it's kind of in the trombone and French horn range.
It's an awkward place to...
So yeah, I mean it's.
Right.
That's about all you're gonna get out of
All right,
that.
do you
so.
mind just doing like a almost chromatics kind of thing all the way from the low to as
Yeah,
high as you
sure,
as
yeah.
high as you can go? That's the...
So that was low E up to high D.
Okay, cool.
So yeah.
Great. So what is probably your sweet spot of your range? You know, the
Yeah.
spot that you most commonly in sort of
You're looking
classical
at-
scoring writing.
Yeah, you're looking at basically B flat to B flat, the two octaves. That
Okay.
range. That's gonna be kind of the meat.
All right. All right. Now you're often, or these days it seems you're a section leader pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
What is the role of the section leader? Are you in charge of just the trumpets, or what's your job?
On the session, as a first trumpet player.
Yeah.
It's very similar to orchestral trumpet playing. You know, we are looked to as a leader whenever it comes to like phrasing. A lot of players lead by just playing and not talking, and then there's a lot of players that talk a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
So it varies. It's each guy or girl is a little bit different, and but as far as musically, we're looked to for phrasing. A lot of times, unfortunately, with film scoring, the first trumpet and first horn sit across the stage from each other.
Right.
So we're often using sign language and funny movements to try to tell each other, hey, we're going to cut off here, we're going to do this, we're going to, back and forth. But luckily, the trumpets and trombones and tuba, we kind of sit in a little pod on our side of the stage. And so we're able to talk, and yeah.
Why don't we talk, like, nowadays, I mean, it seems very infrequent to have the whole orchestra in the room at the same time, which is unfortunate because that's usually where you get the best balances.
Right.
But these days, and we did a session, and it was kind of difficult for you guys because, I mean, for anybody, it's difficult. Can you explain, like, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the things to help overcome or make it an easier session? You know, when you're just striping the brass and the strings were done, 3 days before.
Right. That's become a big issue for us. A lot of times the brass is added on to the strings. And, I mean, we can complain all day. I mean, there's, only having the strings and percussion and click just in this tiny little speaker in your ear, and you're trying to, match pitch and blend and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to having everybody in the room all the time. A lot of the guys playing a lot of, major symphonies in Los Angeles, and we're used to that.
Right.
We know exactly how loud to play or how soft to play based on what's around us. But when you're in a room in a soundstage by yourself, and you're having to play to this little speaker that's in your ear, sometimes it's hard to figure out balance and stuff like that.
So
and
what are
how
some
you
of,
would
like,
necessarily
what are some
play.
of, like, knowing that, what are some of the things you think of solutions-wise to...
Well, there's, to be honest, there's a lot of guessing going on. You kind of
Yeah.
rely on whoever's conducting on the podium to kind of help you out and say, hey, it's too loud, you need to back off, or we need you more here. It's a little bit of a guessing game. It's tough, like one of our best stages is Sony, and when you're spread out that far, there's a huge delay between the horns and then the brass section.
Yeah.
And you start hearing the horns bounce off the wall, and it's
Probably better to kind of maybe bring the horns and the brass closer together.
Yeah, it does help. It
All
does help, but it's rare that happens. I mean, we got to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Okay, so as far as composers are concerned, what are some of the things that they need to know about your instrument in terms of the, fatigue level? Because it's not like a string player where they could just play forever and never get tired.
Right.
Supposedly, what are some of the things we should be worried about? What are difficult things?
For brass, typically, high sustained or any really sustained stuff for us is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, we could play the easiest notes. That's fine for now, but you make us do that for a minute or more, and it starts to get very physically taxing for us. It's kind of like, have you ever seen somebody, they hold like little 5 pound weights out here, and you just sit there and you hold them, and you're like, what's the big deal? But then all of a sudden, after about a minute or more, you're like, oh, I can barely hold this up. It's the same kind of thing we're working with these, all the brass players have to deal with.
Right, okay.
To some extent. It's not that it's not possible. It can get tough, doing take after take of, which is why we stripe, to be honest.
Okay. So it's not necessarily like whether it being a high note or a low note.
That doesn't necessarily matter. Obviously, it's tougher the higher you go because we're really, very small, muscle movement that we're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, just sustained stuff can be hard, or just long playing. There's a lot of great big band writers in Los Angeles, and sometimes shout choruses can go on maybe 8 or 16 bars too long.
Right.
They really can overwrite, and those can be just as tiring. The same thing. And there'll be maybe a rest here or a rest there, but if it's constantly pounding, go, 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 that can be tough.
Yeah.
But
so I guess in a session, what's something that that's a good solution for making sure you guys don't die?
Well, we we kind of have to find our own way.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be a little bit different. A lot of guys in town have but they've chosen to use a smaller instrument, like maybe an E-flat trumpet or a D trumpet. They get generally the same sound out of it, but there's a little bit more of an ease of playing those instruments.
Okay.
And then for some of the high stuff that gets to be really repetitive, especially articulated stuff, we'll use the Piccolo Trumpet.
Okay.
But everybody's a little bit different. Certainly there's, a gentleman in town, Wayne Bergeron, can play high and fast and loud all day long, and he can play soft, he can play great too. I mean, he can do everything. But he's a guy that maybe won't need to resort to a smaller horn all the time. He mostly does everything on the B flat.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah.
And not that it's good or bad. It's just everybody's just a little bit different. They found what works for them.
Cool.
So,
all right. Well, why don't we move on to the mutes?
Okay.
Well, first of all, when you just write mute on the score,
right.
What do we get?
Okay. So for mute, generally we're just going to pick up a standard metal straight mute, so let's see. I'll play. Is open. And one of the first things I want you to notice is that mute doesn't mean soft for us.
Yeah.
That was, obviously you're sitting here in the room. I think you would agree that was just as loud as open. And that's the one thing that you get. For trumpet, most of the time, mute is a color choice, and not necessarily just softer. So we can make it play softer.
Is that true just for the trumpet, or is it straight mute and a trombone get quieter? I don't know.
Yeah, it does. There's something blocking the sound, so it does get a little bit softer. And there's certainly like a different type of straight mute would be a fiber straight mute, and that one's going to be softer.
Yeah.
We'll use that in Mahler or some, a distant solo. We could use that on. I'm talking live performance wise.
Yeah.
Or if we're constantly getting the hand in the studio, we'll get rid of the metal mute and go to something softer.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean softer for us.
Okay.
But it can. A cup mute obviously would be softer. But again, you'll notice it's mostly a color.
Got
It's
it.
a different sound, you know.
Now, is that considered a classical mute, or would you see
It's
that?
mostly used for jazz. We see
yeah.
it classically also. You know, in big band writing, we'll see mute, and cup mute is still written very loud. You know. You know,
Right.
it can be a very swinging, big bandy,
Nice.
you know, old kind of sound. So.
All right, cool. So that's like kind of the three most popular
Well,
mutes, if you will.
the straight and the cup, and then
Straight
the
and the cup.
third most common would be the Harmon Mute.
Yeah.
And this one I've taken the stem out, so it's the.
All right, so about the stem, it's
Uh-huh.
like everyone is confused about that.
Okay.
Do you ever use the stem in? I mean,
Absolutely.
You do.
Yep. And let's see, I've got one. This one. It's just a different type of Harmon Mute.
Yeah.
It's got the stem in, which can come out very easily. And we'll see stem in, and it's just kind of like a radio, old-time radio.
Right.
You know, and then you could do a half stem. And then also in TV land for cartoons.
Right.
The wah-wah mute.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. All right, so then I guess we'll move on to the plunger. When would you use?
Yeah, again, that's mostly, we've seen it sometimes for movies, just for like effect kind of stuff, like. You know, kind of stuff like that, but most of the time it's again.
Right.
You know, so.
So now you got jazz training and classical training. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, well, what did you start with?
That's a good question. I would say
kind
I
of
started more as a jazz player.
Okay.
And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I studied with a gentleman by the name of Boyd Hood at USC. And he said, you know, if you really want to do this, you really ought to get your classical playing together. And there's quite a number of studio guys in town who have that same story.
So you start off with jazz and then try and work their way to classical.
Yeah.
Which is harder, going from, jazz to classical, or the vice versa?
Everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I think most people would say it's harder to go from jazz or like big bandy loud to like soft. That's generally a thing. For me, it's easier for me for some reason. I have a problem going from classical like third trumpet, really low in the staff, to having to play high lead big band stuff. I tend to spread open too much, and
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. All right, what else we got? What's
Mute-wise, let's see. Yeah, so we've got a bucket, which I've got a standard bucket here. I've also got another kind of bucket, which is this is called a solo, S-O-U-L-O. Obviously, when a composer writes, they're just going to write bucket, and then we all have our own buckets.
Okay.
So, but oops, turn off a little bit there. Just kind of more of a covered sound. See it mostly in jazz, but we do see it in classical too.
right?
We also have another cartoony mute would be the solo tone.
I like this one.
Yep, and again, it's kind of a wah-wah. It's kind of a cool little old-timey sound. But maybe to transition, from the bucket, a lot of times we'll use, instead of a bucket, we'll use a flugelhorn. Again, mostly used in jazz, but we'll see it a lot for scores, especially when we have to play a lot of stuff with horn. because again, it's a conical instrument. Something that Doug was talking about between the difference between the chimbasso and the tuba. The chimbasso is more like a trumpet, whereas let's see if you can see here, the tube is basically the same size all the way through the horn until you get to the bell, and then it finally starts getting a little bigger. Right? Whereas a flugelhorn, it's a little hard to tell, but you can see the tube is going to continuously get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, maybe if I put it that way, as it goes all the way around the instrument. So it's got a little bit smoother tone. It's kind of a pleasing, mellower.
Yeah, I could see why it would blend with the.
Yeah, I
horns
mean,
a
you
little
wouldn't
better.
want to. There's actually a new music piece I'm playing this week, and there's actually a flugelhorn with mute. That doesn't really happen. I've
really?
never seen
Okay.
it before, but so this is if you're going to use a mute, you're going to use basically trumpet.
Okay.
But yeah, so this is kind of it's just a smoother, gentler instrument. You don't want to really play too high. A little bit of misconception seems like on composers is that this is a great instrument for low playing. It's not always true. It depends on the horn you have. I mean, it's a little bit easier, but it's basically the same as the trumpet.
Okay.
So it's
So
different
more like
sound.
you just go for it for tonal difference.
Yeah, it's mostly a tonal choice. Yeah, basically
Cool.
the same ranges as trumpet. Definitely don't want to go above a high B flat though. It gets really squirrely for us. Up
Okay.
there.
Good to know.
Yep.
All right. What else we got?
Well, I just have sitting up here. I just have my C trumpet. Depending on the scores that we play, I like to use C trumpet a lot, mostly for the classical stuff.
Okay.
It's just a preference thing, but I'll have usually the B flat and the C there, and sometimes a line that's written will lay easier on a C trumpet. Like so, maybe that's something that's in a gnarly key for B flat, like in F sharp for us would be really kind of third fingery, whereas on here it would be in the key of E, which is an easier key for us.
I see. Okay.
So for us, it's kind of a key choice.
And you can just
Generally get the same sound, even though C trumpet is used mostly in the orchestra, in the orchestral world, and most of the guys in town will play C trumpet. The guys who are doing a lot of the, epic classical film scores.
Yeah.
This is their, choice of horn.
Okay.
So, but you'll have somebody playing a C trumpet, and right next to them, someone will be playing a B flat, and
It doesn't matter.
yeah,
Right.
everybody's good enough that they can blend, and
I see.
so I've got that, and then finally I got the Piccolo
And you can just
Trumpet.
read. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can transpose its sight and all that.
Yeah,
It's not a problem.
most stuff's written either in C or in B flat for us, and
Yeah, so.
everybody just transposes whatever
Cool.
they need.
Actually, along those lines, we did a session a little while ago, and I was really impressed because it was sort of a jazz thing, and we didn't really write much out. We just wrote, I think it was just a melody line, and you just harmonized your own performance. You did like a 4-part trumpet thing, and I was really impressed by that. That's something that I guess an average classical musician wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, it depends.
So-
I mean, it depends on the rep. Had the piece been something that was more classically oriented, I mean, I think everybody's theory is good enough that they write and they play and they could, can hear the changes. And if you needed something chorded out,
Yeah.
they could do it. Obviously, you don't want to rely on that.
charge extra
with the
for
player.
that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's definitely a premium paid on that for most players. But
All right, what's this?
all right, so it's just a piccolo. We mostly use this for Baroque playing. It's kind of a lighter instrument. A lot of players in town will use this for very articulated stuff and upper register stuff. It's just the partials are closer together for us up there. So. It's just kind of a lighter sound. We mostly use this for Baroque playing in classical land.
Okay. But sometimes you said, I think earlier you were saying you would get this if you were playing a lot of high stuff. Would you ever
Right.
swap it out?
Like sometimes you'll get like a chase scene or something that's like, the trumpets are up on like high F sharps going bip bip
Yeah.
bip 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 bip, and there's a very high potential for us to miss notes if we have to keep doing that over
Yeah,
and
yeah,
over
yeah.
on this. Obviously, this is going to be the big sound you want for that.
Right.
But if you just are looking for the note and clean and accuracy, you know, a lot of times we'll grab this,
Cool.
the piccolo to help. You know, especially if we know that you've got a couple takes already where we've got it on there. So again, it's player preference.
All right.
So-
I guess one of my final questions. What's some of your favorite gigs that you had in the recent sort of 5 to 10 years?
Whoa. Geez, you want me to resume, huh?
Yeah. Name drop.
A name drop. Well, let's see. I just ended a run. I took over for the late, great Warren Looning on Dancing with the Stars. And that was a real honor for me because Warren was a real hero, I think, to a lot of, probably every trumpet player in town. I mean, there's certain guys you think of, you know, the Yuan Racies, the Warren Loonings, the Malcolm McNabs, the guys who are like, they're the guys,
Yeah.
you know. And so that was a big honor for me. I've been lucky enough to do the Academy Awards for several years now. I didn't do it this past year, but previous years to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got a great relationship with the guys in the LA Philharmonic. And we actually just got back a couple of days ago from a tour. We did a US-Canada tour with Gustavo Dudamel.
Cool.
And yeah, they had me in a little bit over there, and we have a really great time.
Is he a good conductor?
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's great. Yeah, we have a great time. So
All right, Rob. Well, thank you.
thank you.
Well, there you go. That's the trumpet.
Yeah.
Rob Schaer. All right. Thanks for watching. See you soon.